to episode 233 of the CRICKETher Weekly. We are in Northern Ireland at the moment for England's 3 ODIs against Ireland. We were at the first ODI yesterday, which England won by 4 wickets, and it was a great day at the office for Kate Cross, wasn't it, Sid?
Yeah, I mean, that was the headline on your piece for The Guardian, wasn't it? And I think it would have been the headline that most people would have gone with. I mean, 6 wickets. She also, almost more importantly, she came in at the end when England looked like there might be a hint of a wobble.
There was a wobble. There was definitely a wobble. It wasn't
even a hint, yeah. That were they actually going to be able to finish it off? It's only 25 runs at least when she came in. It must be even more than that.
It was definitely
because
more
she
than
ended
that.
up with more than that.
I think
she?
It was about 50 or 60. I was definitely at the point where I was writing an Ireland shock win piece.
But she came in and, cool head. That was exactly why she was selected as the captain, because, all that experience ultimately told. And, I just feel that overall she was the best player on the pitch yesterday. Yeah. She was the sharpest in the field. She bowled really well. And, when it came to it, she batted well. And, even had the confidence to pulling out a few ramps at the end, when England were just rolling off those last kind of 10 or 12 runs that they needed.
What's really funny is that in the post-match interview, there's only a few journalists here covering it. So there's us and a guy who was working for the Irish Times. And so it was just a couple of us doing the interview, and she was just like, I wanted to ramp. Immediately I came in and I had to rein myself in for overs and overs. And it was really interesting because for the first few overs, her and Bess Heath, their partnership was very much kind of slow and steady wins the race, because there was obviously absolutely no concerns about run rate or anything like that. It was just about trying to steadily accumulate. Kate actually had to say to Bess, actually, we're not going to play like that. We're not going to do what you usually do, which is be all flamboyant with your shots. We just need to kind of rotate the strike, essentially. And then right at the end, Kate Cross suddenly was like, oh yeah, I can whip out a few ramps now because I'm feeling a bit more comfortable, and I think that we're close enough now to the target. So she slightly reined that in, and that was actually important as well in and of itself. And I think, we were a bit surprised when she was given the captaincy, but you can't say she didn't do an excellent job, very competent, and felt like actually she had a lot to do because of 5 caps. I mean, obviously, 2 of those players, Maddie Villiers and Holly Armitage, had played for England before, so they had a little bit of experience about kind of what it's like. But the other 3 were just, it's a bit dazzling, right? Your first England international, and Kate Cross said, well, I remember my first England international, and all I was thinking was, which was out in the Caribbean in 2013, and all I was thinking was bowl it on the cut strip. So she said it was all about just trying to keep everybody calm. And I think in the run chase that was harder, and there were quite a lot of nerves around, but they got there in the end, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And, Paige Schofield and Holly Armitage put together a decent partnership that was kind of core to England's victory, really, because if they hadn't done that, then, England, again, would have been in trouble. And they both, got a decent start. Both of them will probably be sitting there going, I could have gone on a bit further, and both of them probably got out slightly. Definitely. There was a bit of, recklessness crept into people's shot making and people's running. Of course, Maddie Villiers got run out, didn't she?
Yeah.
Going for a second run, that there was they needed 2.5 and over. You did not need to go for a second run there.
No, that was a bit silly. That's what I mean. There was a little bit of kind of nerves and slightly losing your head, and also, I guess, thinking this is an easy chase against a team who we should beat. And so I think that crept in. So we've had 5 caps now. Will they change it up, do you think, for ODIs 2 and 3, Sid?
I think we will see some change ups. I'll be surprised if Georgia Davis doesn't get a cap, because they've brought her out here, and I think that they'll want to make sure that everyone they brought out here in these circumstances does get a cap.
Yeah.
So I think she'll get one. I also think there's a good chance that Bryony Smith gets brought in the next game. I was actually surprised Bryony didn't play in this game, honestly, because Bryony's been in much better form than Emma Lamb.
Yeah.
Obviously Emma Lamb is a player that's England have invested a lot in over the years, and have been a centrally contracted player, and they want her to kind of to take that step up, but she's never quite been able to do it. And again, she just looked a player yesterday that's woefully lacking in confidence and form. Maybe there's an argument there. If she's lacking in confidence and form, you keep her until she gets it back. On the other side of that coin, I think that Bryony deserves the chance to come in and play that role.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because obviously they're fighting it out for the opening spot, aren't they?
Yeah, it's that second opening spot alongside Tammy.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have Bryony Smith and Emma Lamb opening.
I think they need to keep Tammy in there.
They need the experience, don't they? And I think that's interesting because that's what we saw a little bit in game one was, your experience tells, I suppose, and that was kind of, it felt like that was kind of ultimately what won it for England, because obviously Ireland are a very young team. We sometimes talk about England being a very young team, but my goodness, you should look at some of the Irish players. They're like literally at school or right out of school, and obviously less experienced in terms of the amount of cricket that they play as well. But I thought that they put on a good show, and they certainly didn't embarrass themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to put 200 past England, that's the kind of core for that's a decent score. And in other circumstances, they could potentially have won a couple more wickets, fallen down, and they could have gone on to win that match.
I can see them winning at least one of the T20s, because I think that's much more of a crapshoot.
I think that regardless, I think they could win one of these ODIs if they get things right and everything pulls together. But what they need to, in order to do that, is one of their kind of top players, their Gabby Lewis's or their Orla Prendergast, to go really big with the runs. And it's if Orla Prendergast can make 120 rather than 77 or whatever she made, then that's when they're going to put pressure on England. And she's certainly a player that's capable of doing that. She was another one that can actually she got out by losing concentration a little bit.
She definitely did.
And she's of course still a young player, but she really showed her value. Yes, also produced a magic ball to get out of Tammy Bowman. That's going to be the best ball of the series, I would guess. I mean, it's unplayable delivery that Meg Lanning in her prime would not have been able to keep out.
Yeah.
And of course someone's just been signed for WBBL as well as big overseas tournament. That's a fantastic opportunity for her to go and get experience and to play among the best, which is what those Ireland players really need. You can see that, especially the kind of second tier players, they're really lacking that experience of playing the very high level cricket that that the English players get, and of course that the Scottish top players get, as we've discussed from playing in regionals in England.
Yeah, I'd tell you what I am getting, Sid, though, at the ground yesterday. I mean, it helped that it was bathed in sunshine at Stormont, but there was a real nostalgia for what all women's international cricket was like 10 years ago when we first started covering it, because it's just a bit smaller scale, people bringing their own chairs, there was...
Picnics on the boundary.
Yeah, and just a little bit more chill. Like the press conference wasn't, there was no sponsors' logos in the background and nobody having to drink Gatorade or whatever. It was just, me and a couple of others on the boundary with our phones and a couple of players, and it just felt really... I don't know, I just get a bit nostalgic for that sometimes. I know it's silly.
Quite a small crowd as well, though. I mean, in some ways that was nostalgic as well, but it was the kind of crowd that you'd get at England games in 2007, 2008.
So we're talking 300 or 400, aren't we? And I think that Cricket Island will be quite disappointed by that, partly because the weather was so good. It was just beautiful cricket watching weather.
Yeah, no, I mean, locals said it was the best day literally the best day they'd had this summer.
Yeah.
I mean, and in fact, that might have penalised them, because of course people might not have gone because they're like, well, this is the best day of the summer. We're going to go to the beach, or we're going to spend family time rather than. But it's still sad disappointing. Of course, the next two games are both on school days. So the next two games are tomorrow, Monday, and Wednesday. So they're both kids are back at school here in Northern Ireland as they are in England. So I would expect that's probably as good as it's going to get here. But they'll definitely be hoping for more. We're moving to the Republic of Ireland next weekend for the two T20s there in Dublin, and they'll be hoping a bit more crowds there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's look forward to the next couple of games, Sid. Meanwhile, as we were watching England-Ireland, drama was unfolding in the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy back in England. So we do now know our semi-finalists. Diamonds, who we already knew were going to finish top, are going to be playing Sunrisers in one of the semi-finals, and the other one is going to be the Stars against the Vipers. So Stars beat the Diamonds and managed to finish in second place and therefore are going to be hosting the Vipers at Beckenham. I believe that's confirmed. Sunrisers had a real battle on their hands though to scrape through, so a no result would have seen them through, wouldn't it?
Yep.
And it looked like that's where things were going because it was raining quite heavily in Southampton, but then it ended up it was a very tricky chase for the Vipers. It was like 90 odd in 10 overs or something like that.
Yeah, it was a real 10 over thrash.
Yeah.
It looked like a lot of runs, but they got quite close.
They did get quite close, yeah, they did. But it was just kept on losing wickets, and Sunrisers really kind of had to really hold their nerve right at the end. And then ultimately, Grace Scrivens bowled herself in the final over. She was defending 13, so they, it wasn't in that sense. It wasn't a particularly kind of pressure situation, but you don't know what's going to happen when you come on and bowl that. And so I thought that was quite good for her, stepping up as a captain.
Stand up, take responsibility. Don't give it to anyone else. And she did the job that needed to be done, and Sunrisers got through. So that's Sunrisers' first post-season in the regionals at the very last opportunity.
Yeah.
And good for them.
Very exciting, isn't it?
They've got a real opportunity now to go on and actually win this, I think, because Diamonds did finish top. In fact, the top four were actually the same top four that we saw, at the kind of halfway mark when we kind of broke for all the 100 and all that stuff. The form of these sides really does actually look to have taken a bit of a dive. I mean, Diamonds, looked very poor yesterday. I mean, I've only seen brief highlights, but
they
not
were bowled out
good.
for 119 in the end against the Stars. Okay, it was a big chase, but
maybe they were turned off slightly because they knew that they knew they'd already finished top. But it's going to be a challenge for them to get back up again. And if Vipers have lost 4 games on the trot, how's that happened? And can Vipers kind of pick themselves up?
Vipers have managed to qualify despite losing their last 4 games, which is, I have to say, is quite Vipers, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite a Vipers thing to do, is just to always be kind of ever present at finals, no matter what's just happened.
But it feels like Sunrisers are that little bit closer to being at full strength because they've had fewer players. I mean, they have lost Maddie Villiers to this tour, but because they don't have so many international stars, and they haven't had a load of players go off to this tour of Ireland.
Yeah.
I think they've got a genuine chance. We will look forward to kind of following along next weekend. The semi-finals, of course, next Saturday.
Yeah,
and then
absolutely. But one thing that the Sunrisers managing to defend that total means is that the Blaze have been knocked out at the 11th hour. And they were obviously kind of following along very closely on social media. We saw Captain Kirsty Gordon actually tweeting at the Vipers going, "Hello, can you tell me what's going on, please? Is it raining? How much have you got to chase? How many overs are going to be bowled? La la la." So the Blaze are obviously very nervous about that. But it will be really disappointing for them, won't it? But ultimately, they never quite recovered from that very difficult start in the 50 over competition.
Yeah, they were always playing catch up because of that period at the beginning of the tournament where they didn't have the Bryces and they lost a couple of games, and big points that they never quite made back. But if you're the Blaze, you need to look back on this season and go, there's 2 pieces of silverware. We won one of them. Yeah, we didn't win the other, but winning half the silverware in a season, still done pretty well, guys.
Yeah. Okay. They will no doubt be very disappointed though, but they will get another chance next season as the Blaze. We will come to that imminently. The opposite end of the table, some really interesting, not necessarily happy things been happening at the Central Sparks recently. Sparks have been out of it for a couple of rounds basically, haven't they? I mean, they had a poor run leading up to the 100. But they've ended up finishing in 7th place. Bit of a disappointing end to their kind of existence as a brand. How many seasons it's been? Is it 5 seasons in total? Because they were one of the new ones. Didn't exist in the days of the Kia Super League. But the really interesting one is what's happened with Eve Jones, actually, who is the was the Sparks captain, then went on loan to Lancashire Thunder for the last couple of rounds.
Of course they announced that she is going to play for Lancashire next year.
Exactly that. But they didn't initially announce that. That was very much a reading between the lines. What's going on here? You've let your captain go on loan, which is not something that we see really, because the people who you let go on loan are your kind of fringe players, your players who, you know, maybe aren't going to get a game, so you lend them out. You don't lend out somebody who's just scored a century for you and then a half century. And then of course she did go on and then make a half century 48 hours later for the Thunder. So she effectively played in twice in the same round, didn't she?
She did, and there was a little bit of controversy about this, wasn't there? Because I know that there's been some unrest amongst other players because of the PCA's MVP award.
Yeah.
So the PCA give an MVP award, which is one of those awards based on sort of ranking statistics, where they take everything that you've done in the game, all the statistics they've got, and they turn them into a number. And at the end of the season, the person with the highest number gets quite a nice financial prize for that.
Yeah.
I believe they equalised the prize with the men, so it's a decent chunk of money. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a decent chunk of money. So people are a little bit unhappy that Eve Jones has had an extra chance to add points. And you actually asked the PCA about this, didn't you, Raph?
I did ask the PCA about this. And the PCA's official response, that's just a quirk of sport. With ability to transfer, loan, play the knockout stages, some players can end up having the opportunity to play more than others. And the MVP has always been based on most points across each competition. It isn't something that's ever caused an issue across the men's or the women's game, they say, but with more loans happening these days, it's one for us to keep an eye on for sure. Bit of a non-response to some extent, won't do anything to assuage those, you know, that slight discomfort that exists out there about the fact that somebody has essentially played 2 rounds in the same competition. Probably one that they need to kind of maybe tighten up the rules on a little bit. To prevent this happening again. But I've got to say, it just does smack of we're coming to the end of regional cricket, and also there's the element of it being women's cricket anyway, and people are just kind of shrugging and going, oh well.
Yeah, I mean, you can sum up the PCA's response in a meh.
I mean, they did at least respond,
and
I do take the point about, you know, obviously some players will always get more opportunities because they're going to play in the semi-finals and the final, etc.
Somebody injured for a game.
But it wasn't a wholeheartedly convincing response either. Anyway, I just think the Eve Jones thing is indicative of. I mean, we don't know. We don't have inside information, but and we're not in the Sparks dressing room, but it does suggest that if your captain is going out on loan and has effectively, well, now we know, has signed for somebody else next year, something's gone wrong in terms of player management at the Sparks. That is a very difficult thing to happen, to then have to suddenly find a new captain for your last couple of matches as a team in existence. And you know, the appointment of Ali Maiden as the new Warwickshire women's head coach, I'm really excited about that appointment. I've got a lot of time for Ali Maiden. Has great pedigree within women's cricket, but I tell you what, I think he's going to have his work cut out for him to try and bring what remains of this team back together over the off-season, going into 2025, because something has gone wrong there.
Yeah, good luck, Charlie, as they say.
On a related note, Sid, we have had quite a big announcement this week about what 2025 is going to look like from a kind of playing structure perspective. So basically, the big message is more alignment. And we kind of suspected this, but essentially the men's and the women's 50 and 20 over competitions are going to have the same sponsors, so Metro Bank and Vitality. And so that's going to be the men and the women are essentially going to be playing for the same trophies. So the press release said that the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy, our 50 over trophy, is going to still be presented, even though it's going to be the Metro Bank competition. But there was no mention of the Lottie Cup, the Charlotte Edwards Cup. We're taking from that it is being, as you put it earlier in the season, being retired to the great trophy cabinet in the sky. So that's disappointing, Sid. Is it disappointing?
Is it disappointing? I mean, ultimately everyone got what they wanted out of this process. The ECB wanted Metro Bank and Vitality to come on board, because they figure that gives the women's tournament some sort of credibility with the men's fans that, you know, they want to bring in. This, don't forget, a huge driver of this entire project is bringing in the fans that from the men's county game into the women's domestic game.
Exactly.
So by doing that, you know, that's a win. And you know, the ECB wanted more sponsorship. They wanted these companies to cough up a little bit more money. The sponsors ultimately wanted that visibility.
Yeah.
And it obviously has been a tough negotiation because it's taken them a long time to announce it. These negotiations have been ongoing, and we've heard about them for the last couple of months.
Yeah.
But they've got it over the line. They've obviously found a figure. I don't know what the figure is. Obviously, no knowledge about that, but they've found a figure that everybody agrees on. It'll be a bit more money for cricket. It'll be some visibility for the sponsors, and it will be some credibility borrowed from those men's competitions. So I think it's a win for everybody, to be honest. And the Charlotte Edwards Trophy does seem to have been kind of slipped by the wayside because presumably Vitality wanted it to be the Vitality Trophy. Yeah. But at the end of the day, if he who pays the piper calls the tune, Raf.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's been some talk about this on social media. It does seem to be quite divisive, actually. Some kind of women's cricket supporters are very much going, we like having our own trophies with our own names, and why not carry them over? Others going, well, actually, it's going to be a new structure, and we need new competitions, and we need new trophies to compete for. And I don't have a problem with that side of things. So it's not necessarily clear cut. I mean, I would say that you're absolutely right. I think that Vitality will have pushed hard for this, whereas Metrobank have probably just given in a bit more easily and gone, okay, just use your existing trophy. So that's what I suspect has happened, that Vitality has pushed back on this. I think the other thing to remember is that the Charlotte Edwards Cup was named in a hurry. They were initially hoping to get sponsorship for that competition. They didn't manage to do it, so they just kind of cast around and went, well, here you go, Charlotte Edwards, have a trophy named after you. And she was always faintly embarrassed about that, and it was probably slightly inappropriate, to be honest, because if somebody's still very involved in the game and is coaching in the game, I probably would go, that's not the best idea to have a cup named after them. So I'm not totally comfortable with full alignment. We'll come to the names in a minute, but I think in this instance it's okay to just retire it and move on because of the people involved. Lottie will be the last person to have any issues with this whatsoever. Let's talk about those team names, Sid, because this is the other big bit of news that came in this week. The names are disappearing, and the names that have been around for a long time in the Kia Super League through into the new regional structure are also disappearing. So we're not going to have a Somerset Storm. We're not going to have a Hampshire Vipers. Now, very interestingly, the only kind of brand name that's properly surviving is the Blaze. So Lancashire are going to keep being Lancashire Thunder in the T20s, but are going to just be Lancashire in the 50 overs. Notts have not put their foot down. And the Blaze are going to be the Blaze in 50 over and 20 over cricket. And
we know this is what the players wanted because, the players told us that that was what they wanted.
Absolutely. We interviewed Kirsty Gordon about it and she was very insistent.
Yep, so, they got their way. I don't know whether the players were spoken to elsewhere, or what conversations went on. Again, we can understand that there are some people going, well, isn't the point to kind of pull in the fans from the men's game? Yeah. Let's see if Notts can make it work. I mean, that's a challenge to Notts, right? And it's going to be really interesting as a test case because we've actually got a proper A/B test here where we can go, do Notts have more difficulty pulling over the fans? Are they getting smaller crowds next year? We'll see. We'll see whether Notts get smaller crowds than your Essexes and your Southampton, whatever they are. Hampshire, that's the place. Hampshire.
I mean, I've said it before. I just think if you've got Hampshire Hawks and Essex Eagles, why can't you have Hampshire Vipers and Essex Sunrisers? I don't really understand what the problem is if you've got the county suffix.
And that's all I was expecting. I was expecting Notts Blaze if they did anything, but they're still going to keep with the Blaze.
Apparently. I know. It's the capital T. It's we are the Blaze, not we are Blaze.
There's
we are the Blaze. Which is an interesting kind of exercise in branding. Somebody who knows more about branding than me has obviously decided this is the way to go. I agree with you. It'll be interesting as a kind of a test case of what happens if you keep your old brand. Anyway, good to have a little bit more information about what next year is going to look like, although I've still got a kind of notebook with about 50 to 100 unanswered questions. Over to you, Beth Barrett-Wild, to provide some of the answers over the next few weeks. Finally, this week, Sid, we did have a question come in. We like getting your questions. We like trying to answer them where we can. So this person says, thinking ahead to the T20 World Cup, I've heard lots of discussion about the bowlers that England are taking and whether there are too many spinners, but I haven't heard much about the batters. I've just seen on the ICC batting rankings, England's top batter is Nat Sciver-Brunt, coming in at number 18. Alarm bells are ringing for me there, but I don't really understand the ranking system, and I'm just wondering how much of a concern that is.
It is a really interesting question, so thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that, you know, within cricket, nobody pays any attention to the ranking systems. Nobody gives them any credence. Nobody values them. Everyone thinks they're nonsense. And we actually know this is true. How do we know this is true? Well, when people pick Sophie Ecclestone in a big competition, like she's just been picked up in the Women's Big Bash, they'll go, oh, we've picked Sophie Ecclestone because she's the number 1 ranked bowler in the world. So I'll be then, okay, so you picked Sarah Glenn as your second choice. Oh, no, why would no. Sarah Glenn has consistently been the second ranked player in the world in these ranking systems for the best part of the last couple of years, and she never gets picked for these things. So that proves that people don't actually think the ranking systems are worth anything.
They only use them when it supports what they've already decided is the case.
Yeah. So that's the first thing to say. People don't believe in the ranking system. But the second system is, if you take the ranking system on merit, the thing for England that they will say, and I think this is fair, is that England have got several match winners in their team. So they're not really bothered if one of those match winners is Nat Sciver that's at 17 and Heather Knight that's wherever she is and Alice Capsey that's wherever she is. They've got lots of players within their team that are winning matches for them. The people that are higher up the rankings, your Hayley Matthews, for example, your Chamari Atapati, they're generally the ones that, if the team wins, they're almost always the one that's kind of behind that win. So because England have got several match winners rather than one, that kind of almost penalises people in the rankings. Nat Sciver coming in, maybe at 5, at 6, she's not going to get a lot of opportunities necessarily because maybe Alice Capsey will have already run the match for them. So
we should say why that's in T20s. So in ODIs it's a different story, and that Nat Sciver-Brunt is much higher up the ODI rankings. Because
England are much more dependent upon her in ODIs.
Yeah.
And, that's actually bad news, I think. So I don't think it's too bad news for England. I think that they are basically selecting the best 5 batters in England. I think that the batting selections are right. And I think that England won't be unduly worried. There's lots of match winners. They go confidently into this T20 World Cup. That doesn't mean they're going to win it, but I think that their confidence is justified.
Great. Thanks for that, Sid. Thank you, as ever, for tuning in, and we will see you in a week's time when we will know who's going to be in the Rachel Heyhoe Flint Trophy final. Bye for now.
Bye.